Mamos. You know the modern day Mamos Media. Mamos Media. You don't know the modern day I love Mamos.
Good evening and welcome to today's news review. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host Rohi Konatige.
Mamos Media, Afana be Oslo, no Encodia.
Rohi Konatige, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned.
Welcome to Gambia Today News Review. Listeners, you're tuned into Mamos Radio on Mamos Media. It is Friday, 18th of December 2020. I am Nene with a review of the nation's top headlines coming to you live from Oslo, Norway. Gambia Today News headlines. OIC Gambia announces the hiring of Dar Engineering and Mahfuz Engineering for the design and supervision of the Electricity Network Enhancement Project. International Migrants Day GIFOM requests halt of African women's enslavement in the Middle East. Jonathan arrives to help national dialogue on constitution. Gambia denies bribery for deportation allegations. Listeners, let's look at these news headlines in more detail. We begin with the Mamos Media headline. OIC Gambia announces the hiring of Dar Engineering and Mahfuz Engineering for the design and supervision of the Electricity Network Enhancement Project. Petroleum House Bruceby, 17th of December 2020. The Gambia OIC Secretariat, in collaboration with the National Water and Electricity Company, NAWEC, wishes to announce the recruitment of Dar Engineering and Mahfuz Engineering joint venture as a consultant for the design and supervision of the Electricity Network Enhancement Project. The project is part of the major infrastructure and development projects being implemented in the country ahead of the hosting of the 2022 OIC Heads of State and Government Summit in Banjul. The project aims to improve the electricity capacity of the primary substations of NAWEC, enhance the transmissions and distribution of electricity, as well as address the problem of low voltage in the greater Banjul area. Additionally, the project will enable NAWEC to expand grid electrification to new urban areas. Dar and Mahfuz Engineering, which is a joint venture between Saudi and Gambia engineering firms, was selected after a competitive public tender process involving several local and Saudi-based companies. Under the contract agreement, the consultancy firm will provide services for the design, pre-tender, pre-contract services and supervision of construction works. The duration of the contract is 18 months and will be implemented in 2 phases, feasibility studies and design 6 months, and the supervision of construction works 12 months. In line with the OIC Gambia Secretariat's desire to empower local businesses, the firm is also obligated to undertake knowledge transfer as an important aspect during the design and supervision stages. Listeners, we move on to the other Mamos Media headline. International Migrants Day, GIFORM requests halt of African women's enslavement in the Middle East. As the world marks the International Migrants Day 2020 to recognize the efforts, contributions and rights of migrants, the African Union AU has been admonished by the Journalists International Forum for Migration GIFORM to put a stop to the enslavement of countless African women in the Middle East through the horrible kafala system. Kafala is a trade system in the Middle East that encourages the trading of migrants as slave workers in convenance with countries that part with their female folks in exchange for money. Quote, in this illicit human trading, a lot of governments, their officials, cabals and human traffickers have capitalized on the pitiable state of non-empowered citizens grasping to survive under the harsh economy, to sell them to slavery and in return receive kickbacks in dollars from the slave masters, unquote. Listeners, The Standard has headline for us this Friday, Jonathan arrives to help national dialogue on constitution. Former Nigerian President Dr. Goodluck Jonathan has arrived in the Gambia last night to support the country's ongoing constitutional review process and facilitate the process of forging a workable national consensus. He was welcomed at the airport by Justice Minister Dauda Jallow, who confirmed that the former Nigerian president will help in the national dialogue on the constitution. According to a press statement signed by Jonathan's advisor, the former president was invited to the Gambia by President Adama Barrow, is expected to deploy his experience and goodwill as a well-respected international statesman towards advancing the constitutional review process and enhancing the progress of the continuing national dialogue in line with the expectations of the Gambians. Listeners, The Point has captioned for us this Friday, Gambia denies bribery for deportation allegations. The Gambia government has denied allegations that it accepted bribery from the European Union in exchange for deportation of migrants to Banjul. Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Gambians Abroad on Tuesday confirmed that the deportations indeed took place in recent weeks between Gambia and the Gambia. Quote, however, those citizens have exhausted all legal means to stay in those countries from where they are being deported, unquote, Mr. Sulaiman Jai, Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Ministry, said. The issue of Gambian migrants in Germany was on the agenda when German President visited Banjul in December 2017. During bilateral talks with the Gambian president, the two countries agreed to mutually cooperate on the issue of the migration guided by the international best practices. Listeners, thanks for tuning into Mamos Radio. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Nene, for today's news review. Listeners, you live on Mamos Radio. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Thank you, listeners. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konetige, proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Please stay tuned. We'll be back with the Mandinka News with Lamin Marong and the Wall of News with Azerbaijan. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Ansam fele ndunda albela moy kan mamos na radi pumba la kondal ka kibaro mo futanda le wate bi fanan kana wala ke bajani ka kibaro ke fonsi molu tentu woni ka fulu men ya lonko kan tentu kan sambitu ya wato bela en kono trade kam la kafu ba be tentu la ila dukula lu be dawda en ba fule ala barka bake ila keke ndela ani na dukula me gambe bantala ba fule ala barka bake semen ka dron ngadon kibaro nyin famo kono IOC mi ya lonko akata kafu baleti mi ya lonko misimu banku jamalu ikafuta nyoma kanyin kafu nyinka londi ikonyi watulu ibe kankularo kele ba foloko da design ingere company leti aning mahfukuz design ngimu company leti mi ya lonko kuranduku wala pandala kekende ataje bake ikonyi watulu ibe buludunyo kala nyola ka duku ke ka electric duku me Gambia kuranduku puruka o kuranduku nyindati meeting on Yinkera Petroleum House member Bruce B. B. Lungo. Coin Petroleum House member Bruce B. Menkera Gambia la IOC la Nyaton Kulu ye Bloody Nyola in Gambia la Gion Kuranduku la company Kafme Nawek, Kobe in Kibaro Nufutandila Mobe Mawafole ko ye Karandro datile la Dukulalu aning in Kafolu me alonko Kafo ko Dar Engineering aning Mahfokos Engineering. Unibemu Kafulete many along ko ebe blodi ke na nyola pour ka do ko ke ka ferol lande ka jibe ko Gambia la kuraw be nyamen pour ka crosser ka jibe nyin do ko to men Canada ti ibala la mu labulu nyaadi lete e nyi mu kibaru ko ngolete me nyi safe Mamos la media wala nyi safe andi to Mamos media ye safe ro ko fanan e ko gifo me yan ko kafu dunia kafu bale membe e journalist lu ka kibaru di ke bon dunia ton ko jamato e o mbo kibaru fanan futanda lol fanan nata fuko ko nyi lungo nyi memba kono memu tamala lu la lungo e be o jonjura kan ya itandi fanan ko tamala lu men ka bo banku ka banku e ka batanyi menke e ko Africa la banku lu men ka futa nyoma yela wosida itandi ko nyi journalist len ka fu ba nyanda ka do ko nyi continent ka yitandiroke ila kaje ko e be mum feral land la pour ka dandiroke e ka musole men ke jongoti nyin arabu banko lu do tarin o kibar bunna men safa Mamos la ngoti mbo fana futandalma e Jonathan Menkera Nigeria la president noti nyimbe men noma president koto afana futata Gambia nyi watulu pour ka korsiroke Gambia luwa kuto nyi mendeda ate Goodluck Jonathan afutata Gambia kunungularo anu abe semento yakala anu abe korsiroke la ko luwa lu mendeda pour ka do kundi ani bayi mu fere nyaadi le kalaje ki war bonna men safe standard la newspaper mbo fana futandalma iko masakunda fanan iko ye bayro ke komol ke tume ka foko ye tapale yale ke waran ka dukurole ke ye dukule pour ka Gambia non membe bantla bankoluto ke sayni Gambia point la kibar bunda wala yin safe nsemen ka do ngadon kibaro nyi fongo kungo kono IOC Gambia ko ben kibaro fitan la mol la ko ba faloko do ko bon la me ka fa ko Dar engineer ani Mark Focus engineer nyuniye ferol landi anin ka korsiroke Gambia la kuran ko duku mbe kering anin pour ka barkandi o duku nyina kana commencer e meeting bayin ke bi lungo menkera Petroleum House anin Gambia IOC ko ila nyatun kolu ko ye blodi nyola anin Gambia la kuran ni jodo ku bundalu nawek pour ka ko ye doku woni mendate pour ka karandroke doku lalu men be Gambia jang ani bantla bankolu ka fula men fana nata ka fuma wal fana ngi doku ni faransa ta jele e ka fulu be ka fula nyoma pour ka korosirke Gambia la kuran la nyala ani kaaje be ferol land la nyaadele e ko ni doku ni mi kana commencer abe dikila membala do wolon pour ka korosirke anu pour ka batandike kuran ni joku nyala Gambia katabaka nyama ngi ani meeting ba me alon ko IOC nyanda kake Gambia in 2022 iko nyinkera kuti yako kuranga kunya be Gambia nyamen elefta ko ferolu landi purka barkandi kala andi be men folo kala ya across le fananko nyin kuran ko nyi membe ke kan Gambia abata warata batele sakonina ta santla kombo satewlu to bake ko blajama be je meya lonko e buka kuran sota nyama sakonina ta banyulu la tundolu la iko nyi mukute meya lonko elefta ka korosiri ko la anun kaje fananko be kuran nyin continent la purka futandi sant la bankol do fanan anyin dar ani mak focus ila engineering iko nyuni blodi nyola in Saudi la electric company woni Gambia la electric company ka fomen be jang woli blodi nyola ka je ko jumale lu nyanta ka du ko ke pour ka Gambia la courant nyi beti andi an biri be nyin kankularo nyin kala company jama meni e dakaje meni alon ko londo soto courant la ko to jamale dakaje bar kafulu me a gagné nyinel kanana Gambia pour ini kafu nyoma pour ka karandro fananding ani se korosirol ning labulu landi pour ka je be Gambia la kawang ni jeni iba sonen la nyaade e ko do ko nyim betala karitan ani saylela pour ka korosiro ke ani be fero landi la e ba ya e be do ko en kala nyamen ya la ke labula do ko bula fulalati do ko do be kara korosiro lati ani be do ko de daro nyin iba tamans ibe dararo nyin nune la nyaadi le ani do nyim be kala korosiro lati me alon ko kaje do ko nyanta kanyadi len anu bidu ko banta fanan ka korsi wo betala sanji kilin nela iko nyin ay aussi la nyin kafuba yanyin kele ko pour ka company lu membe Gambia pour ko fanan sembentuya anu kaje ko pour ka Gambia la biso so nyin fanan ka barka kaje nin do ko nyimbe ke ka nyimbe mu ferolati kaji ko e londolu pour nyim banku fulolu isi talano nyami alon ko asikena fati banku fulolu be kibar buna men safe wala mu Mamos la media te ikonyi international migration day ikonyi bimu lumbalete mea lonko luntang lumeni katama bimu la lungleti anu jifo menkela dunia kafubati jonodi so lain kafo ye dandla polisi mosi londrike musolu ke jongoti nyamen ni arabu bankolu to iko baawni dunia bele nyin lungu suude ko nyimu luntang la luwalati andung e ba fala fanan ko pour mo le signin ko nyin kankula andu mobe sike korsir lati an kelade kaaje ko pour African Union men kad Africa la banku bati pour isi dandirke an isi yamarke in jono so len kafu bala pour isi do ko nyin continent ka yitandroke dunia mo la ko nyanta ka musolu ke jongoti arabo la nyin banku luto me alon ko e ka musolu ke jongoti ani lo julay ka fay ko kafala ni mukute mi alon ko anyanta kabo e ko kafala ya londre drone ni middle east men ke dan arabo len banko kan pour ka ni joya safaro me ke kan pour ko continent di anu ni keta kute mi alon ko ay mojama batandi anu ni keta kute mi alon ko akata modoli julay ramulati pour ka kodo soto je ni o molu ni wafi ekonia jiben ni mukute me ya lonko masakunda jama yenyin konyin lonne andu nyanda ka fanan ko ito lamolu me ya lonko kadunyin jula ya nyin kono pour que yamori ka bula ka tuje andu nyin dol fanan kadunyin kono le kantu yaji ko e mando ku koda soto si menkeno si fan ne fano nyamen wala si fan sembentu yano nyamen wala katina dol kadunyin kono oto nabo nyama fo si korosirke andu fero landi pour kaje membe imbondi la nyamen kibar buna men safe wala mu Mamos la media te Jonathan Menketa former president Nigeria afutata Gambia la pour ka makoro kan ka crossro ke Gambia la loi kuto nyimende data abe tamala nyamen nyinga tenin Goodluck Jonathan akata president to Nigeria la nunto andun afutata nyin kunu laro pour ka makoro ke Gambia be nyin ferul men lande kan ko nyi loi kuto nyimen nata abe tamane le nyaadile anun abe fahamno la nyaadile Gambia banko kan ko ya bendun airport o nyinto na minister menkeda justice minister Dawda Jallow wala abendu airport menkeda Nigeria no la president tunum pour kana makoyro ke anum pour ka ke diamulati moluning masakunda tema ni nata nyin luwanyin kudo nyime bedada kan akoy kibaro nyi membondi nyi Goodluck Jonathan atnatal pour ke yamari anin ichu ku i nyinkeda Nigeria fanamu Nigeria no te anu afanan ikobe nyimen futatatan iko Gambia masakunda menkeda la president Adama Barrow ikatele ya kumandi anu jamina ko anu ya londa fananko ay londo men soto ni nata nyin luwa sifa la karola abekala kutume ya lonko abe makoyro kala anu abe yamarlo kala purka bambandirke anu ka siloli tandila ni nata purka nyin luwa kuto nyin ka keno fenti to arbunda men safe wala mu standard la newspaper de iko Gambia fanang balanta ko ye tapale waran duko lebta pour ka ila Gambian dingol membe tuwabu pour ke sayindi masakunda nyim balang ako ke tumemen na kula me alon ka manke ka foko European la kafuba ye kodo la dila polisi la Gambia luntangol men be je polisi sani no banjo nyame permanent secretary member minister member bantla bankulu jokonyoyala a yenyi bank tanata tambila a itande ko e kanyi mo sando men fo kula me alon ka sototale ni lokun tambila kono ke bonina jamana ke samana Gambia akbar wo nyawnyang ko mu Gambia no me alon ko ye sandi nan Gambia kula me alon ko ito lesilo ni nyantol men soto tubabu pour kataraje o silori ni bele banta o bele fata abe ko dron lo amantaraje men si mutano kasino banko nyinkan wala katna yodol ye sandi Suleiman Jai to permanent secretary at le nyinku mo banke ako Gambianol me ya lonko ke bondina Germany ke saindi in keda kutu me ya lonko ako ka chata nun bring Germano la president ni Gambia ila data Gambia December kono 2017 yenyin biribe buludo ku ke na nyola ni Germany ni Gambia tema nyin kol mu kutu me ya lonko ye kachala je pour ka je ko be fahamro kala nyaadi ni nata ko Gambianol me sabatri ngo banko nyin kan kibar bunda men safe wala mu point la newspaper de baade woni ne kibaro to mi fotana tamena ka fotan dalma na be tata ko man solo no le nga fa ma fa kun sawnta al salo na harmadi na so da malman nal baade malam mi maram dol kay kiyam man samba flan ne mbara fa nyaranta.
Proudly sponsored by Unique Energy in the Gambia. Good evening, I'm your host Rohi Konatege. On today's news review, Mamos Radio takes a look at the international news making a splash in national newspapers in the United Kingdom and the United States. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Good evening, listeners. I am your presenter, Sainab Jaiba. Thank you for joining me on Mamos Radio as I take a look at the national newspapers' front pages from the UK this Thursday. The Sun claims that the government's advice for Christmas means we should eat our festival by law. Pet owners will also be able to take their cats and dogs to Europe more easily after Brexit, the paper also reports. The Daily Mail's headline is The Fright Before Christmas, which describes Boris Johnson's warning that families should take a picture of a 9-year-old Ella Kissy Deborah, who became the first person in history to have officially died as a result of air pollution. Her mother is calling for a new Clean Air Act in her name after the coroner's landmark ruling on Wednesday. The Daily Telegraph leads on the Prime Minister's claims that asking people not to get together at Christmas would be in Christmas, little being the operative word this year, as the government urges people to curb their Christmas celebrations. The Financial Times leads on reports members of Parliament could be called back to the Commons before Christmas next week to approve a last-minute trade deal with the EU. French President Emmanuel Macron is now the biggest obstacle to bring. Welcome back, listeners. Let's take a close look at the front page of the Daily Mirror. The Daily Mirror is critical of the Prime Minister, who is pictured on the front page at yesterday's Downing Street press conference over his decision not to reverse the 5-day relaxation, with its headline calling him coward. He won't change the law and wants you to take the blame for killer third wave, the paper says, after Mr. Johnson urged people to think hard before meeting friends and family and take personal responsibility over household mixing. That report continues on pages 4, 5, 6, and 7. Listeners, we now take a close look at the front page of The Guardian, which has headlined, Prime Minister in stark warning, rain in Christmas celebrations. Mr. Johnson's warning was stark, says The Guardian, which points out the comments about Christmas came with less than a week to go before the planned relaxation of rules is due to start on December 23rd. The paper says the more cautious tone is reflected in the updated government guidance, which says forming Christmas household bubbles should be done only if you feel you absolutely need to. The Guardian notes that after Boris Johnson insisted the UK would push forward as one on Christmas, Scotland and Wales broke ranks and issued stricter guidance, while the Welsh Government tightened up the rules in law. Read more on page 2. Also featured on the front page of The Guardian is the smiling face of a 9-year-old Ella Kissy Deborah, who is pictured on the front page after a coroner ruled the air pollution was an important factor in her death. Her mother is calling for an Ella's Law to clean up the environment for future generations. An analysis piece says politicians have ducked the decisions needed amid the noisy honking of the motorist lobby, but they can no longer pretend illegal levels of pollution are a victimless crime. Turn to page 4 for details of that story. Thank you, listeners. That was the UK's national newspapers' front pages review with me, Zainab Jaiba. Stay tuned to Mamos Radio for the rest of our news program. Thank you for joining me. Have a good
Thank you, listeners. That was the end of tonight's news review from the CEO Lamin Marong, known as Kiang Lennox Asen, and Mr. Bori Dabo, our country director and marketing manager in the Gambia. Also to our Mamos News Desk, Chief Editor Mr. Suleiman Dabo, News Editor Lamin Sanyang, Mamos reporters on tonight's news review Usman Marong and Emel Bojang. Special thank you to the Nenes Fans Club. Thank you, listeners, once again. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. GMT. On that note, we say good night and bye.
Africa, Abedas for a Alabama.